The house looks like every other house on the block, and that's the first thing that bothers me. Porch light glowing soft and obedient, curtains drawn just enough to suggest privacy, not secrecy. The air smells like wet leaves and cold asphalt, the kind of night where sound carries too far. I stand at the edge of the driveway, hands in my coat pockets, and feel that familiar tug behind the eyes, the sense that I'm about to get lost in something that refuses to stay simple. Somewhere inside, a woman is dead, and somewhere nearby, the man who loved her most is already rehearsing his grief. Before delving into a thorough investigation of the case, let me pause for a second, because if you're the kind of person who enjoys slow-burn mysteries whispered into the dark, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. No pressure. I'll still be here either way, probably running on bad coffee and worse sleep. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. I step inside, careful not to disturb the choreography of responders and uniforms. The living room is tidy in that aggressively normal way, like someone cleaned for company rather than for themselves. Family photos line the mantel. Birthdays, beach trips, a Christmas where everyone is wearing matching sweaters and pretending that was their idea. Front and center is the husband, Daniel Harper, mid-40s, account manager, PTA, volunteer, the kind of man neighbors describe with words like solid and reliable, as if he's a brand of shelving. His wife, Emily, is upstairs. Daniel sits at the kitchen table, hands folded around a mug he hasn't touched. The coffee's gone cold, forming that thin, sad skin on top. He tells me he made it hours ago and forgot to drink it. That detail sticks. People forget a lot of things in shock, but they rarely forget what their hands are doing. Still, detectives still argue whether early observations like that mean anything at all, or if we just project meaning onto caffeine and porcelain because it's easier than facing the human mess. I found her when I got home, he says, voice steady enough to be convincing. I called 911 right away. I nod, because nodding is free and encourages talking. Inside my head, I'm already building a timeline. According to dispatch, the call came in at 9:42 p.m. According to Daniel, he arrived home at 9:35. 7 minutes is a strange amount of time. Too short to clean up, too long to do nothing. No one's quite sure whether those gaps are where truth hides or where memory breaks down. Upstairs, the bedroom feels cooler than the rest of the house, like the air conditioning favors grief. Emily lies on the bed, arranged almost peacefully. No overturned furniture, no obvious signs of a struggle. A responding officer tells me there's no blood spatter beyond what's immediately necessary, which already nudges this case away from chaos and toward control. One grounded detail jumps out immediately. The position of her phone on the nightstand, screen dark, notifications cleared. Someone took the time to silence it. That's not something accidents usually do. There's a superstition among some old-school cops: never trust a quiet room. Loud crimes are honest. Quiet ones are rehearsed. I don't fully buy it. But tonight, it hums in the back of my mind like tinnitus. Daniel insists he was at work late. His keycard swipe backs that up. 8:58 p.m. Exiting the building. That's solid. Concrete. Forensics love timestamps because they don't cry in interview rooms. But the drive home should take 20 minutes. Even with traffic. Maybe 25. That still leaves a sliver of time unaccounted for. Slivers are where murders like to hide. I circle back downstairs and ask Daniel to walk me through his evening again. Same words, same pauses. That's either a sign of honesty or practice. I crack a light joke about how I can barely remember what I had for lunch, let alone my exact movements after sunset. He smiles at the right moment, but it doesn't reach his eyes. That's cliché, I know. Eyes like empty windows, but clichés exist because they show up to work on time. A forensic tech quietly mentions that Emily's body temperature suggests she's been gone longer than Daniel's timeline allows. Estimating time of death is more art than science, based on algar, mortis, and ambient conditions, but it's rarely off by an hour. Investigators still can't agree how much weight to give those early estimates, yet they're often the first domino. As I stand there, listening to the refrigerator hum, I notice a small thing. Daniel's phone on the counter, face down. Most people leave it face up, like a loyal dog waiting for a command. Face down feels defensive. Or maybe he's just polite. See? Already I'm arguing with myself. Occupational hazard. There's an odd investigative tidbit that floats through my mind, something I learned years ago from a detective who swore by it. He claimed that in domestic cases, the guilty spouse almost always overdescribes their love. They talk about soulmates, best friends, forever. Innocent spouses, he said, talk about routines, groceries, chores, stupid arguments about toothpaste. I don't know if that's true, but Daniel tells me Emily was the love of my life 3 times in 10 minutes. No one's quite sure whether that means anything or if grief just reaches for the biggest words it can find. As the night deepens, the house seems to exhale. Officers pack up. Evidence bags whisper as they're sealed. Daniel asks if he can go upstairs again. I tell him not yet. He nods, too quickly. Another maybe. Another mental sticky note. I step outside for a moment, letting the cold air reset my senses. The street is quiet, neighbors peeking through blinds like they're watching a nature documentary about predators. Somewhere, a dog barks once and then thinks better of it. I rub my eyes and think about how tired I am, how every case feels like it starts at the worst possible hour. Chronic lack of sleep, the true villain of modern policing. Back inside, I take one more look at the kitchen. The cold coffee, the spotless sink, the faint smell of lemon cleaner. Too fresh for a random Tuesday. Remember that suspicious coffee cup? I tell myself. Remember the 7 minutes. Remember the phone. Face down. This case wants to be simple. A devoted husband. A tragic death. A life shattered. But I've learned the hard way that when everything looks normal, that's usually the lie. And as I watch Daniel Harper sit alone at his table, wrapped in borrowed sympathy, I get the quiet, crawling sense that I'm staring at a mask so well made it almost fooled me. Almost. That word sits in my chest as I move through the kitchen again, letting my eyes do what they do best at night, stare at ordinary objects until they start confessing. The cold coffee cup is still there, still wearing that thin skin of neglect. The phone is still face down. Daniel Harper is still sitting like a man, waiting for someone to hand him the correct emotion. I don't give him the satisfaction of another big question right away. Instead, I do the boring thing that breaks more perfect stories than any dramatic accusation ever has. I build the timeline. It starts with a swipe of plastic against a sensor. Your keycard shows you left the building at 8:58, I say, keeping my voice gentle, like I'm reading bedtime facts about clouds. Walk me from that moment. Daniel blinks slowly. I got to my car, drove home, came in, found Emily. Directly home? I ask. Yes. The word lands too clean. There's a trick I use, one that sounds like therapy, but is really just polite pressure. It's called a cognitive interview technique. You ask someone to recall events in different orders, from different starting points, because rehearsed stories tend to fall apart when you tilt them. Real memories can wobble, sure, but rehearsed ones usually shatter. Okay, I say. Tell it again, but backwards. Start with the 911 call at 9:42 and work back. A flash of irritation flickers behind his eyes, quick as a match strike. He covers it fast. I called when I realized she wasn't waking up. Before that, I was upstairs. Before that, I came through the front door. His voice slows at the edges, like the story is buffering. 7 minutes. That gap keeps peeking at me from behind the curtains. I step aside and check the dispatch sheet again. The call time is solid. What isn't solid is what happened between the front door and the phone ringing. People in shock can lose track of time, yes. But 7 minutes is a specific kind of loss, big enough to matter, small enough to hide. Detectives still argue whether those missing minutes are the best indicator of guilt or just the best indicator that human brains are a mess under stress. Tonight, I'm not looking for certainty. I'm looking for friction. I ask for his phone. He hesitates. Then he slides it to me like he's offering a live grenade. Forensics starts simple. Call logs, messages, battery usage, location services. A phone is a diary that doesn't know how to lie unless someone teaches it. One grounded detail jumps out fast. His phone shows no outgoing calls between 8:58 and 9:42. No texts. No navigation, not even a quick doom scroll. That's unusual. Most people can't drive 10 minutes without tapping their screen like it owes them money. I didn't touch it, he says quickly. I was driving. Responsible, I murmur. You're already better than half the city. That earns a thin smile. Joke 1. Light and harmless, like tossing a pebble at a window and listening for cracks. But my eyes keep moving. Location history is either off or conveniently empty for the window I care about. That could be normal privacy settings, dead battery, bad signal, or it could be deliberate. No one's quite sure whether turning off location services is a red flag anymore, or just modern adulthood. Outside, a patrol officer confirms a neighbor's doorbell camera points toward the street. We pull the footage, and I watch the tiny digital clock in the corner like it's a witness with a nervous twitch. Doorbell cameras are great, except their clocks drift. Some are off by minutes, sometimes more. It's a small, maddening truth. Even machines can't keep time without help. Quirky, investigative tidbit, one of my favorites, because it's equal parts nerdy and petty, comes into play here. We don't just accept the timestamp. We times calibrate, times it. We compare it to a known, accurate time source, check whether the camera syncs automatically, and sometimes we even match an event on the video like a passing bus that's logged elsewhere to pin down the drift. I've met detectives who treat DVR timestamps like holy scripture. I treat them like a drunk friend. Useful, but you don't let them drive. The footage shows a car turning onto the street. Headlights sweep across the lawns. It pulls into Daniel's driveway. Timestamp reads 9:28. But if the camera is fast by, say, 5 minutes, that's 9:23. If it's slow, 9:33. Time becomes a suspect all on its own, wearing a trench coat and insisting it was just passing through. And yes, I hear how that sounds like I'm accusing the concept of time of homicide. I've had worse suspects. We check another camera across the street, angled differently, different brand, different clock drift. It catches the same car arriving with a timestamp of 9:34. Now we're getting somewhere. Not truth yet, but a tighter fence around the lie. If Daniel's building exit swipe is accurate at 8:58, and he arrives somewhere between roughly 9:29 and 9:35, that drive time is 31 to 37 minutes. The office-to-home route should be around 20 to 25. That means there's about 10 minutes unaccounted for, times before times he even hits the driveway. 10 minutes plus the 7 minutes inside, 17 minutes. 17 minutes can hold a whole second life. I keep my tone soft when I ask the next question. Did you stop anywhere? No. Gas station, ATM, convenience store, a drive-thru you're ashamed of? He frowns. No. I lean back slightly, the way you do when you want someone to feel the space between their words, because the camera suggests you took longer than the direct route. His jaw works. Traffic. At 9 p.m., I let a tiny bit of sarcasm leak through. What, was there a parade of people late for bedtime? Joke 2. He doesn't laugh. I step away and let the texts do their work. Meanwhile, I do mine quietly, triangulating. We request his vehicle's basic telematics. Some cars track, trip starts, stops, average speeds. Not every model, not every owner opts in, but when it's there, it's a gold mine. If we can't get it quickly, we look at toll records, parking receipts, any automated breadcrumbs he didn't think about, and then there's the old reliable, cell tower pings. It's not GPS precise, but it places a phone within a general area based on which towers it connects to. During that drive window, Daniel's phone hits a tower that doesn't make sense for the most direct route. It's a subtle deviation, one that could be explained by signal handoff quirks. Investigators still can't agree how confidently you can interpret tower data in dense areas, but paired with the longer drive time and the camera windows, it's not nothing. I return to the kitchen. Daniel looks up like he's been practicing that exact upward glance. Daniel, I say, I'm going to ask something simple. If your evening is clean, the details will support you. He swallows. Okay. What time did you leave your office times parking lot, asterisk? He starts to answer, then stops. That hesitation is a hairline fracture. Right after I swiped out. Did you talk to anyone on the way to your car? No. Did you sit in your car for a moment, make a call from the lot? No. His nose are stacking like plates in a shaky tower. I pick up the cold coffee cup, not touching the rim, just lifting it by the handle. You made this earlier. Yes? You forgot to drink it. Yes. I set it down again. Your hands remembered to make coffee. Your memory forgot to drink it. But your timeline remembers every step perfectly. His mouth opens, closes. I'm trying. Okay, my wife is. I know. I cut in gently. That's why I'm being careful. But careful doesn't mean blind. This is the cover. A third joke wants to crawl out something about how my own memory can't be trusted to locate my keys, let alone a murderer. I keep it anyway, because humor is a pressure valve in rooms like this. I'm not asking you to be perfect, I say. I'm asking you to be real. He rubs his forehead. I drove. I came home. I found her. I called. 7 minutes. Walk me through the front door, I say. Slow, like you're narrating it to someone who's half asleep. He exhales, annoyed despite himself. I unlock the door. I step in. I call her name. From where? From the entryway. Does she answer? No. What do you do next? I go upstairs. Directly upstairs? Yes. And you find her? Yes. I glance toward the hallway. The staircase rises like a throat-swallowing light. Here's the thing about homes. They record your movements in tiny ways. Shoe prints in dust, scuffs on baseboards, displaced fibers on carpet. Tonight, one realistic detail will matter later. The tread marks on the bottom stair, fresh, slightly darker, like someone went up and down more than once. I don't tell Daniel that yet. Instead, I ask, did you touch anything? I checked her. I tried to wake her. I panicked. That part sounds real. Messy. Uncontrolled. Finally, a note that isn't polished. But my timeline board in my head is filling in with stubborn shapes. A longer drive. A tower ping that bends the route. A doorbell camera clock that argues with another doorbell camera clock. A 7-minute gap inside a quiet house. And a man whose story is too smooth until you tilt it. Time is refusing to behave. And if time won't behave, it's usually because someone trained it not to. Time refuses to behave, so I stop arguing with it and start interviewing the people who live around it. The street outside the Harper's house has that sleepy, suburban hush porches like little stages, every window a potential audience. I'm back at the curb with my collar up, watching the house breathe light through its curtains. Somewhere inside, that cold coffee cup is still sitting like a tiny, bitter monument to the 7 minutes Daniel can't explain. I keep thinking about those minutes, but I also know something else. Timelines crack fastest when you understand what a home sounds like. Times before, times it goes quiet. So I begin the canvas. Door-to-door interviews are unglamorous. No dramatic music, just me, a clipboard, and my best, I promise I'm not here to ruin your evening face. The first neighbor I speak to, a woman in slippers and a cardigan that says times I have opinions about lawn care, times tilts her head and asks the question they always ask. Was it an intruder? Or is it an ops? It's too early to say, I tell her, because that sentence is a detective's version of a lullaby. Soothing, vague, and often technically true. She clutches the door frame like it's an emotional support object. They seem so normal. Normal. That word again. It's the favorite disguise. I ask what she heard tonight. She heard sirens. She saw lights. She didn't hear a scream. No crashing. No sudden chaos. Another neighbor, a man who looks like he came with the house, says the same thing. Quiet couple, he adds. He's always polite. Polite people commit crimes too, I say, mostly to myself. Then I soften it with a joke because I'm not trying to terrify the neighborhood into buying extra deadbolts. Sometimes politeness is just good branding. Joke 1. Light. The kind you can almost yawn through. 2 doors down, I get something better than branding. Friction. A young couple answers, and the guy speaks first. Eager and uncomfortable. They argued sometimes, he says. Not like yelling all the time, but sharp, like knives in sentences. That's the kind of description I trust. People don't invent that unless they've felt it through their walls. What was it about? I ask. He shrugs. Money, I think. I heard a count once. And He glances at his partner, then continues. I heard insurance another time, like, don't you dare, or something. Insurance. I keep my face neutral, because the last thing I want is to teach witnesses what to remember. But inside, my brain does that small, cold click. Here's a grounded investigative detail that matters in cases like this. I don't just take money problems as gossip. I document it and verify it. Financial stress leaves, fingerprints, credit card utilization spikes, late payment notices, odd cash withdrawals, new lines of credit. It's not glamorous, but it's real. Love stories end in spreadsheets more often than poetry. Back at the station, I request expedited access to the basics. Joint account summaries, credit reports where permissible, credit card transaction logs. We also note whether there's a life insurance policy and who benefits. That's not cynicism, it's procedure. In domestic homicides, money isn't always the motive, but it's frequently the amplifier, and amplifiers are dangerous. I call Emily's sister next. Her voice is raw, like she's been crying in small bursts for hours. He's acting, she says, and I can hear the certainty behind the grief. That's a strong statement, I tell her gently. What makes you feel that? Emily told me things, she says. Not like he hit her, but pressure. Always pressure. He wanted everything to look perfect. He'd get cold when she didn't play along. Cold, quiet, controlled. The same words the crime scene is whispering. She tells me Emily had started keeping notes, little entries on her phone, sometimes in a physical notebook. Nothing dramatic, just dates, arguments, things said, a record. People do that when they feel unheard. When they're trying to prove to themselves they're not imagining the slow erosion. I ask if Emily ever mentioned leaving. There's a long pause. She didn't say divorce, her sister admits, but she said she felt trapped, like she couldn't breathe in her own house. The word trapped lands heavier than it should. I picture the tidy living room, the perfect family photos, and I can almost feel the weight of that public image pressing down like a low ceiling. No one's quite sure whether pre-divorce tension is a reliable predictor of violence, or if we just notice it in hindsight because it fits the narrative. But it's a thread I can't ignore. I ask about Daniel's reputation. Everyone loves him, her sister says bitterly. He volunteers. He helps neighbors. He's the guy who carries groceries for old ladies. It makes you feel crazy when you think something's wrong. Little 4. That's the strange magic of the family man mask. It doesn't just hide the truth. It makes the truth sound rude. I pull Daniel's phone records again, not to chase the timeline, but to map the relationship. Who did he call? Who did he text? Who did he times, not times, call? Silence can be its own kind of confession, if it's selective enough. And then I do something that sounds a little fringe, even to some detectives. I look at language patterns. There's an old, controversial practice sometimes called statement analysis. Some swear by it. Others roll their eyes so hard you can hear it. The idea is that deception shows up in small linguistic habits. Distancing language, unnecessary qualifiers, sudden formality. Investigators still argue whether it's science, pseudoscience, or just a fancy way to trust your gut. I don't treat it like proof. I treat it like a flashlight useful for spotting shapes, not for declaring what they are. Daniel's phrasing keeps circling back to my wife, not Emily. Possessive, formal, slightly removed. It doesn't convict him, but it nudges my instincts in a direction I don't like. When I bring Daniel back in for a more focused talk, I don't start with death. I start with marriage. Tell me about you and Emily, I say, like it's a casual question over lukewarm coffee. Not the highlight reel, the real version. He blinks. We were good. Most couples are good, I murmur. Even the ones who hate each other by Thursday. Joke 2. A tired little grin tries to appear in his face and fails halfway. I press gently. Any recent stress? Work? Money? Family? He exhales. Everyone has stress. Sure, I say. But not everyone ends up with patrol cars on the lawn. That lands. His jaw tightens. We had bills, he admits. She spent. I tried to keep things stable. Stable is an interesting word, I say. Sometimes it means safe. Sometimes it means controlled. He looks at me sharply. Are you saying I controlled her? The section eyes. I'm saying I'm listening, I answer, voice soft, and you're choosing your words carefully. He denies any talk of separation. He denies any life insurance changes. He denies any serious fights. But the neighbors heard something. Emily's sister felt something. And here's where the marriage behind closed doors starts to take shape. Not a dramatic storm, but a slow pressure system, quiet arguments, money concerns, the kind of resentment that doesn't explode so much as compress. I asked Daniel about insurance. His eyes flicker just once. I don't know what they heard. Neighbors hear a lot, I say. Sometimes they hear the truth. Sometimes they hear the TV. No one's quite sure which is worse. Joke 3. Because I'm apparently incapable of going 10 minutes without using humor to keep myself from turning into a statue. He rubs his hands together, and I notice the skin around his knuckles is slightly dry, like he's been washing them often. That could be stress. It could be winter. It could be something else. I file it away without leaping to conclusions because this section of the story isn't about the smoking gun. It's about the quiet build-up, the domestic weather report that tells you whether lightning was possible. By the time I step out of the interview room, I'm holding a marriage that looks nothing like the photos on the mantle. A marriage that had money pressure, image pressure, and a kind of cold friction that doesn't show bruises, but does leave marks. And as I walk back through the hallway, I think about that perfect husband's shadow. Sometimes shadows are harmless, just proof there's light behind you, and sometimes they're the only honest outline of what's really standing there. Time refuses to behave, so I stop arguing with it and start interviewing the people who live around it. The street outside the Harper's house has that sleepy, suburban hush porches like little stages, every window a potential audience. I'm back at the curb with my collar up, watching the house breathe light through its curtains. Somewhere inside, that cold coffee cup is still sitting like a tiny, bitter monument to the 7 minutes Daniel can't explain. I keep thinking about those minutes, but I also know something else. Timelines crack fastest when you understand what a home sounds like. Times before, times it goes quiet. So I begin the canvas. Door-to-door interviews are unglamorous. No dramatic music, just me, a clipboard, and my best, I promise I'm not here to ruin your evening face. The first neighbor I speak to, a woman in slippers and a cardigan that says times I have opinions about lawn care, times tilts her head and asks the question they always ask. Was it an intruder? Or is it an ops? It's too early to say, I tell her, because that sentence is a detective's version of a lullaby. Soothing, vague, and often technically true. She clutches the door frame like it's an emotional support object. They seem so normal. Normal. That word again. It's the favorite disguise. I ask what she heard tonight. She heard sirens. She saw lights. She didn't hear a scream. No crashing. No sudden chaos. Another neighbor, a man who looks like he came with the house, says the same thing. Quiet couple, he adds. He's always polite. Polite people commit crimes too, I say, mostly to myself. Then I soften it with a joke because I'm not trying to terrify the neighborhood into buying extra deadbolts. Sometimes politeness is just good branding. Joke 1. Light. The kind you can almost yawn through. 2 doors down, I get something better than branding. Friction. A young couple answers, and the guy speaks first. Eager and uncomfortable. They argued sometimes, he says. Not like yelling all the time, but sharp, like knives in sentences. That's the kind of description I trust. People don't invent that unless they've felt it through their walls. What was it about? I ask. He shrugs. Money, I think. I heard a count once. And he glances at his partner, then continues. I heard insurance another time, like, don't you dare, or something. Insurance. I keep my face neutral, because the last thing I want is to teach witnesses what to remember. But inside, my brain does that small, cold click. Here's a grounded investigative detail that matters in cases like this. I don't just take money problems as gossip. I document it and verify it. Financial stress leaves, fingerprints, credit card utilization spikes, late payment notices, odd cash withdrawals, new lines of credit. It's not glamorous, but it's real. Love stories end in spreadsheets more often than poetry. Back at the station, I request expedited access to the basics: joint account summaries, credit reports where permissible, credit card transaction logs. We also note whether there's a life insurance policy and who benefits. That's not cynicism, it's procedure. In domestic homicides, money isn't always the motive, but it's frequently the amplifier, and amplifiers are dangerous. I call Emily's sister next. Her voice is raw, like she's been crying in small bursts for hours. He's acting, she says, and I can hear the certainty behind the grief. That's a strong statement, I tell her gently. What makes you feel that? Emily told me things, she says. Not like he hit her, but pressure. Always pressure. He wanted everything to look perfect. He'd get cold when she didn't play along. Cold, quiet, controlled. The same words the crime scene is whispering. She tells me Emily had started keeping notes, little entries on her phone, sometimes in a physical notebook. Nothing dramatic. Just dates, arguments, things said. A record. People do that when they feel unheard. When they're trying to prove to themselves they're not imagining the slow erosion. I ask if Emily ever mentioned leaving. There's a long pause. She didn't say divorce, her sister admits, but she said she felt trapped, like she couldn't breathe in her own house. The word trapped lands heavier than it should. I picture the tidy living room, the perfect family photos, and I can almost feel the weight of that public image pressing down like a low ceiling. No one's quite sure whether pre-divorce tension is a reliable predictor of violence, or if we just notice it in hindsight because it fits the narrative. But it's a thread I can't ignore. I ask about Daniel's reputation. Everyone loves him, her sister says bitterly. He volunteers. He helps neighbors. He's the guy who carries groceries for old ladies. It makes you feel crazy when you think something's wrong. Little 4. That's the strange magic of the family man mask. It doesn't just hide the truth. It makes the truth sound rude. I pull Daniel's phone records again, not to chase the timeline, but to map the relationship. Who did he call? Who did he text? Who did he times, not times, call? Silence can be its own kind of confession, if it's selective enough. And then I do something that sounds a little fringe, even to some detectives. I look at language patterns. There's an old, controversial practice sometimes called statement analysis. Some swear by it. Others roll their eyes so hard you can hear it. The idea is that deception shows up in small linguistic habits. Distancing language, unnecessary qualifiers, sudden formality. Investigators still argue whether it's science, pseudoscience, or just a fancy way to trust your gut. I don't treat it like proof. I treat it like a flashlight useful for spotting shapes, not for declaring what they are. Daniel's phrasing keeps circling back to my wife, not Emily. Possessive, formal, slightly removed. It doesn't convict him, but it nudges my instincts in a direction I don't like. When I bring Daniel back in for a more focused talk, I don't start with death. I start with marriage. Tell me about you and Emily, I say, like it's a casual question over lukewarm coffee. Not the highlight reel, the real version. He blinks. We were good. Most couples are good, I murmur. Even the ones who hate each other by Thursday. Joke 2. A tired little grin tries to appear in his face and fails halfway. I press gently. Any recent stress? Work? Money? Family? He exhales. Everyone has stress. Sure, I say. But not everyone ends up with patrol cars on the lawn. That lands. His jaw tightens. We had bills, he admits. She spent. I tried to keep things stable. Stable is an interesting word, I say. Sometimes it means safe. Sometimes it means controlled. He looks at me sharply. Are you saying I controlled her? The section eyes. I'm saying I'm listening, I answer, voice soft, and you're choosing your words carefully. He denies any talk of separation. He denies any life insurance changes. He denies any serious fights. But the neighbors heard something. Emily's sister felt something. And here's where the marriage behind closed doors starts to take shape. Not a dramatic storm, but a slow pressure system, quiet arguments, money concerns, the kind of resentment that doesn't explode so much as compress. I asked Daniel about insurance. His eyes flicker just once. I don't know what they heard. Neighbors hear a lot, I say. Sometimes they hear the truth. Sometimes they hear the TV. No one's quite sure which is worse. Joke 3. Because I'm apparently incapable of going 10 minutes without using humor to keep myself from turning into a statue. He rubs his hands together, and I notice the skin around his knuckles is slightly dry, like he's been washing them often. That could be stress. It could be winter. It could be something else. I file it away without leaping to conclusions because this section of the story isn't about the smoking gun. It's about the quiet build-up, the domestic weather report that tells you whether lightning was possible. By the time I step out of the interview room, I'm holding a marriage that looks nothing like the photos on the mantle. A marriage that had money pressure, image pressure, and a kind of cold friction that doesn't show bruises, but does leave marks. And as I walk back through the hallway, I think about that perfect husband's shadow. Sometimes, shadows are harmless, just proof there's light behind you, and sometimes, they're the only honest outline of what's really standing there. Someone is controlling the story. And the funny thing about control is that it doesn't like being questioned. It hates uncertainty the way a neat freak hates muddy shoes irrationally, personally, and with a level of fury that surprises everyone who thought it was just a preference. So I stop chasing Daniel Harper's timeline like it's a stray cat, and I start doing something more effective. I press where the mask is glued on. Interviews are theater, sure, but interrogation is choreography. You don't dance with force. You dance with rhythm, pressure, release, pressure again until the person across from you forgets which version of themselves they're performing. Daniel sits across from me in the station's interview room, the kind with neutral walls designed to make time feel thicker. The overhead light is gentle tonight, no harsh spotlight. This is bedtime mystery mode, not cop show mode. I want him tired, not defensive. He's wearing a different shirt now. Still neat. Still the kind of neat that says, asterisk. Even in tragedy, I remain brand consistent, asterisk. I lay a legal pad in front of me and write nothing on it at first. That empty page makes people talk. They imagine I'm writing down their sins in visible ink. Daniel, I say softly, I want to help you understand what happened in your home. The best way to do that is to make your story match the evidence. He nods like a man nodding through a sermon. We've got the do not disturb toggle at 9:12, I continue. We've got the driveway cameras. We've got the stair scuffs, suggesting more movement than you described. His jaw tightens. I don't know how any of that proves anything. It doesn't, I say, and that's the truth. Not by itself, but it tells me there's a part of the night you're not describing. He takes a breath. I said I panicked. Sure, I murmur, but panic has a style. It's usually messy. Your scene was quiet. The word quiet again, like a bell being struck in a dark room. He looks away, and I notice something small. He's not crying. Not that everyone cries the same way grief is weird, personal, unpredictable. Still, in the first hours, most people leak something. Tears, rage, numbness. Daniel leaks control. A grounded detective detail comes into play here. Baseline behavior. Before I push harder, I compare how he acts now to how he acted earlier, his pacing, his language, his breathing, his micro-movements. It's not mind-reading, it's observation. If he's calmer under increasing pressure, that's not typical shock. It can be training, personality, or performance. I switch gears. Tell me about Emily, I say. His shoulders drop a fraction, relieved. He wants to talk about times, her asterisk, because it's safe ground and looks good. She was wonderful, he says quickly. Kind. She cared about everyone. Did she care about herself, I ask. He blinks. What? Did she feel safe? I keep my tone gentle, almost sleepy. In the last few months. His eyes harden. Of course. Then why was she documenting arguments, I ask. And I watch his face the way you watch a glass you've set on the edge of a table. That question is a pressure point. His neck tenses. She overreacted, he says. She was dramatic sometimes. Dramatic, I repeat. That's an interesting word, like she was performing. He leans forward. She was stressed. She had anxiety. She got ideas in her head. There it is. The first real crack. He's not describing grief anymore. He's describing a times problem, times he had to manage. Investigators still argue whether contempt is more revealing than anger in domestic cases. Anger can flare and pass. Contempt is a long-term climate. And Daniel's voice has a faint, chilly edge now, like he's speaking about a malfunctioning appliance. I let a small joke slip out, because the room is getting tense and my job is to keep him talking. I've met people with ideas in their head, I say. Most of them just start podcasts. They don't end up on a coroner's table. Joke 1. Dark adjacent, but still PG-13. Daniel doesn't laugh. That's fine. Jokes aren't always for the suspect. Sometimes they're for the detective who needs to stay human. I move to a technique I've used 100 times. The evidence sandwich. You start with something undeniable, add something suggestive, then return to undeniable. Your building's swipe at 8:58 is solid, I say. Your arrival window, based on 2 cameras, suggests a longer drive than expected. Your phone settings show the do not disturb toggle. Those are facts. He swallows. So what? So your story has holes, I say softly. And holes are where juries imagine monsters. His nostrils flare. Are you threatening me? No, I answer. I'm describing gravity. He goes quiet. Silence stretches. I count his breaths. 1, 2, 3. Controlled. 2, controlled. Now I bring in the quirky, fringe tidbit, partly because it's real and partly because it rattles people who think they've thought of everything. We're doing particulate analysis on your shoes, I say casually. Dust. Pollen. Sometimes it tells us where a person's been, even if their phone doesn't. His eyes flicker fast. Involuntary. There's the crack, widening. Pollen? He scoffs. That's ridiculous. Nature is petty, I say. And that's joke 2, because it's true. It gets everywhere. Detectives still can't agree whether methods like pollen profiling are worth the lab time in modern urban cases, but suspects don't need consensus. They just need the fear that their own cleverness has blind spots. I watch Daniel's hands. He rubs the pads of his fingers together, a small, repetitive motion. Self-soothing. But he's also wiping imaginary residue. It's subtle. People do it when they feel dirty, physically or morally. I change the subject abruptly. Another cognitive technique. Pattern interrupt. What did you do with your car keys when you got home? He blinks. What? Your keys? I repeat. Patient. Where did you put them? In the bowl, he says quickly. There's no bowl in the entryway, I say, because there isn't. We photographed it. We cataloged it. There's a small tray, not a bowl, and it sits on the kitchen counter, not by the door. He freezes just for a beat. Then he corrects himself. The tray. I mean the tray. The mask slips. Then he yanks it back into place. No one's quite sure whether these tiny slips are the brain misfiring under stress or the subconscious refusing to keep track of lies. But the way he corrected too quick, too clean, tells me he knows he's stepped off script. I lean back, letting him feel the space. Daniel, I say, you've built a story that makes you look like a man who came home to tragedy. But the details little ones keep pointing to a man who was home times before times tragedy became a phone call. His eyes sharpen. You can't prove that. Not yet, I say. But the truth doesn't need your permission to show up. His lips press into a thin line. For the first time, his calm starts to fracture, not into tears, but into irritation. Control hates being cornered. He stands abruptly, chair scraping. This is insane. I keep my voice low. Sit down. He hesitates. Sits. But his breathing is faster now. His jaw is working. The family man act is straining at the seams. I slide a photo of the stair scuffs across the table. You said you went upstairs once. He stares at it like it's an insult. The stairs suggest more. I continue. So, tell me why. He shakes his head. I don't know. Maybe I went down to get my phone. Maybe He stops. He just offered the first alternative explanation without me feeding it to him. That matters. When innocent people clarify, they often volunteer specifics. When guilty people clarify, they often test out excuses like shoes in a store. Okay, I say gently. You went down for your phone. Where was it? In the kitchen, he says, then blinks, realizing what he's done, because earlier he implied he called 911 from upstairs. The crack is now a visible seam. I don't pounce. I just let the inconsistency sit between us, warm and alive. Investigators still argue whether you should confront a suspect immediately when they contradict themselves, or let them keep talking until the contradictions pile up. I prefer the pile. It's harder to sweep away. So you went downstairs, I say softly. That explains the stairs. That explains some of the missing minutes. But it raises another question. He swallows. If you found Emily upstairs and she wasn't waking up, I continue, why would you leave her to go downstairs for your phone? Why not call from upstairs or shout or anything? His eyes flash with anger now. Because I panicked. There it is, I murmur. Finally, a real emotion. Joke 3 could be something like, asterisk, congratulations, you're human. Asterisk, I don't say it. The room is too sharp. Daniel's anger doesn't explode. It compresses. He clenches his hands, then releases them slowly, like he's practicing restraint. And in that restraint, I see the most dangerous part of him, the belief that he can still manage this. He leans forward, voice low. You think you're clever. I'm tired, I reply, honest as a confession. Clever takes energy I don't have. He almost smiles, almost. Then it dies. I stand, ending the session before he regains his smoothness. That's another tactic. Leave while the crack is open, so it keeps widening in his mind. People don't sleep well after realizing they contradicted themselves. As I walk out, I think about the evidence that whispers, the timeline that bends, the marriage that pressed like a thumb on a bruise. And now, finally, the family man act is cracking. Not because I yelled, not because I threatened, but because control can only hold a mask in place for so long before the skin underneath starts to itch. The itch under the mask doesn't make a man confess. Not usually. It just makes him times move. Times and movement is something I can measure, map, and eventually pin to the wall like a butterfly that really should have stayed in the woods. So while Daniel Harper goes home to whatever version of sleep his conscience permits, I go hunting for the shape of his plan, because the scene at the Harper house isn't loud enough to be impulsive. It's too controlled, too tidy, too curated. Remember that lemon cleaner smell, the wiped lock, the silenced phone? Those aren't the fingerprints of rage. They're the fingerprints of someone who wants the world to see a specific story and never look behind the curtain. I start where every almost perfect plan starts, with the story the killer wants me to believe. A devoted husband works late, comes home, finds his wife unresponsive, calls for help. No signs of forced entry. No big fight the neighbors can testify to. The body positioned neatly, like sleep. A home that looks normal enough to make tragedy feel plausible. It's not a bad script. It's just written by someone who doesn't understand that detectives don't watch the main plot. We watch the continuity errors. A grounded forensic detail gives me my first clean angle. Toxicology. Not because I'm hunting for something sensational, this isn't a thriller. It's paperwork with occasional heartbreak, but because quiet scenes often lean on chemistry. The medical examiner's preliminary findings don't shout murder. They whisper timing. There are traces of a common sedative medication in Emily's system, nothing exotic, nothing movie villain. The kind of thing people legitimately take for sleep or anxiety. The problem isn't that it's there. The problem is the concentration and the context. If Emily took it herself, there should be a pattern. Recent prescription, regular dosage, some history. But her pharmacy records show she hasn't filled that medication in months, and her sister insists Emily stop taking anything stronger than herbal tea and stubbornness. Now this part matters. None of that is a courtroom conclusion by itself. People borrow meds, people forget, people take old pills, but when you layer it with the silenced phone at 9:12 and the shifting arrival window, the sedative becomes less sleep aid and more tool. Detectives still argue whether Daniel planned the chemistry weeks ahead or improvised that night with whatever was in the medicine cabinet. I don't have to settle the debate yet. I just have to follow the trail. It leaves. And then I find the almost perfect part. Daniel tried to build an alibi out of times, systems, times instead of people. People are messy. Systems are obedient. Keycard swipes, security logs, the kind of corporate footprints that look so clean on paper you want to frame them. We pull the full access control report from his office building, not just the one exit swipe we already have. Patterns matter more than single points. And sure enough, there's a gap that makes my skin prickle. Daniel badged out earlier in the evening, then badged back in, then badged out again at 8:58. An alibi loop. It's a classic move for someone who thinks in spreadsheets. Leave work, do the thing, return to work to prove you were there, then leave again. The trouble is, loops don't erase the road between points. They just create more places to get caught. I picture it like this without turning it into a how-to, because I'm here to solve it, not teach it. He likely leaves the office, makes a stop he doesn't want recorded, returns to refresh the late-working husband image, then leaves for good and heads home with a calm face practiced in the rearview mirror. And I can almost hear him thinking, asterisk, who's going to question a keycard log? Asterisk, me. I'm going to question it. I question my own reflection at 3 a.m. Daniel. A keycard doesn't stand a chance. Joke one slides out in my head. My sleep schedule is so bad that a keycard log could accuse me of trespassing in my own kitchen. I keep my tone soft anyway when I say it to my team. If insomnia were illegal, I'd have a stronger criminal record than half our suspects. We line up the loop against the camera windows. The timing fits times 2 times well. It's engineered. And engineered timing has a weakness. It hates randomness. So we look for randomness. His detour. The cell tower hit that didn't match the direct route. Remember? The longer drive. The missing 10 minutes before he hits the driveway. That detour isn't just a detour, it's the seam in the plan. We pull traffic cams where we can. Not everywhere has them, and not every camera angle is useful. But convenience stores do. Gas stations do. ATMs do. And Daniel's car, same make, same color, same small scuff on the rear bumper shows up in the glow of a gas station canopy around 9 p.m. He gets out, walks inside, buys something small. Receipts don't lie. They just sit there, boring and patient, waiting for a detective who's too tired to be impressed by charisma. The purchase? Disposable gloves and a pack of disinfecting wipes. Maybe something else mundane, gum, a bottled drink because people who plan like this love camouflage. They think normal items make abnormal intentions disappear. Joke 2 threatens to bubble up. Nothing says innocent family man, like late-night disinfecting wipes, right? I let it out gently when I briefed the prosecutor later. If he'd bought flowers, we'd call it romance. He bought wipes, and suddenly, I'm interested. That stop explains the lemon cleaner smell. It explains the wiped lock. It explains why the house felt freshly sanitized in the middle of grief. It doesn't prove what happened upstairs, but it proves the scene was Times managed asterisk, and management is where guilt likes to live. Now for the quirky, fringe tidbit, my favorite kind of tool, because it sounds like folklore until it works. We request the home router logs and smart device activity, not to spy for fun, to see what the house itself noticed. Smart devices timestamp pings, disconnections, voice assistant activations, phone connections to Wi-Fi. Houses are full of little digital witnesses now, all of them gossiping quietly. A lot of detectives avoid this because it feels technical. I don't. I'm an equal opportunity snoop. The Harper router shows something interesting. Daniel's phone connects to the home Wi-Fi earlier than his story suggests, around 9:05 p.m. That's before the driveway camera window we pinned to roughly 9:29, 9:35. Now, could that be a glitch? A delayed log entry? A device reconnecting from a saved network while driving by? Possibly. Investigators still can't agree how reliable consumer router logs are for minute-by-minute reconstruction, but paired with the gas station stop at 9:09 and the Do Not Disturb toggle at 9:12, it draws a clean, uncomfortable line. Daniel, or at least his phone, touches the orbit of that house earlier than he claims, and then the small mistake that ruins everything shows itself, almost like the case is getting tired of whispering. The Do Not Disturb toggle at 9:12 p.m. Daniel likely thought silencing Emily's phone was a minor detail, just eliminating the chance of a call, a text, a noisy interruption that could complicate his narrative. But phones log settings, changes. That's the cruel comedy of modern life. Your device remembers your betrayals with better accuracy than your friends remember your birthday. If Daniel was at a gas station at 9:09 and Emily's phone flips to Do Not Disturb at 9:12, then one of two things is true. Either Emily did it herself, moments before she died, unlikely, given everything else, or Daniel is closer to that phone than he admits. No one's quite sure whether he toggled it personally or used some connected device feature, family account settings, shared access, anything like that. But however it happened at a time that doesn't respect his story. And there's more. When we examine Daniel's car infotainment system, because yes, cars are basically rolling diaries now, we find recent destinations and brief stop records. One pin sits near a riverside pull-off that matches the odd tower ping. A place where you can stop without anyone asking questions. A place where you can throw something away, or sit for a few minutes and rehearse your devastated husband voice. Joke 3 slips out as I stare at the map. He picked a spot so cliché, I'm surprised it didn't come with dramatic fog. Daniel's plan was almost good. Almost. He built it on systems. Logs, clean surfaces, a quiet scene. He tried to make the death feel like a sad accident and a tidy life. He tried to keep the marriage story locked behind smiling photos and polite volunteering, but he couldn't control everything. He couldn't control the dumb little timestamp in a phone setting. He couldn't control 2 doorbell cameras arguing about time. He couldn't control the fact that stairs remember feet. He couldn't control the way disinfectant smells too fresh when grief is supposed to smell like sweat and panic and unanswered questions. And now, with his looped keycard pattern, his late-night wipes, his detour, and his own contradictions piling up like dirty laundry he forgot to hide, the family man who almost got away is starting to look less like a victim of tragedy and more like the architect of it. The case stops whispering the moment the pieces finally agree to sit in the same room. It's just after midnight when I lay the timeline out again. Keycard loops, camera windows, router logs, that neat little Do Not Disturb toggle at 9:12 that keeps blinking like a guilty eyelid. My desk looks like a crime scene made of paper. Photos, printouts, a map with circles and arrows that make me look either brilliant or unwell. Possibly both. I've seen kinder art projects from toddlers. Daniel Harper comes back in because we ask him to. He doesn't come in handcuffed. Not yet. We're still in that delicate stage where a man thinks he can talk his way out of gravity. He sits, folds his hands, and puts on the calm again. The family man costume, the polite volunteer, the guy who carries groceries for old ladies and, allegedly, never touches a phone setting he didn't mean to. I keep my voice low, YouTube host calm with an ASMR edge, because loudness is a gift to people like Daniel. Loudness lets them play victim. Quiet makes them listen to themselves. Daniel, I say, I'm going to show you the version of tonight the evidence believes. He scoffs softly. Evidence doesn't believe anything. True, I murmur. It just remembers, which is more than I can say for my sleep schedule. Joke 1, gentle and tired. He doesn't bite. I slide the keycard report across the table and tap the first loop. You swipe out, then you swipe back in, then you swipe out again at 8:58. That's not working late. That's a loop. He leans forward, scanning, eyes moving faster than his face. I forgot something. What did you forget? I ask, and I'm watching the muscles around his mouth, the micro-tension that shows up when someone is inventing, in real time. A file, he says. A folder. Which file? I ask. His eyes flick to mine. I don't know. It was work. No one's quite sure whether people forget details because they're stressed, I say softly, or because the detail never existed. His jaw tightens. I switch to something more concrete because control types love arguing philosophy, but hate arguing timestamps. I slide the gas station receipt copy. 9 p.m. gloves, disinfecting wipes. He stares like the paper insulted his mother. The camera has your car, I continue, and the clerk remembers you because you paid an exact change. Apparently you're the sort of man who likes tidy numbers, and that's not dramatic. It's mundane. and mundane as deadly in interrogation rooms. He swallows. I must have stopped for cleaning supplies. I finish calmly. Right before you came home to discover your wife. I let the words hang. Silence is a tool. Silence is also, frankly, my favorite coworker. It never lies, and it never asks me to attend meetings. Joke 2 stays inside my head this time, because Daniel's face is starting to shift from offended to cornered. I slide the Do Not Disturb log next. 9:12 p.m. Emily's phone gets silenced. His eyes flare. So she turned it on. Maybe, I say. I mean it. Detectives still argue whether she could have done it herself in the minutes before she died. But here's the problem. Her phone was on the nightstand. Her notifications were cleared, and she hadn't been using that feature regularly. He scoffs again, a brittle sound. People use their phones. Sure, I say, but she didn't text anyone. She didn't call anyone. No, I'm okay. No, I'm scared. No, Daniel's being weird tonight. I lean in a fraction. And her sister tells me she kept notes, dates, arguments, a record. People don't keep records when everything's fine. His lips pressed together. He's holding the mask in place with muscle now, not confidence. Here's where I introduce the grounded forensic detail that makes the story stop being theoretical. Toxicology. The medical examiner found sedative levels that don't match her recent pharmacy history, I say. Not a sensational drug. Something common. Something easy to hide in a drink or a dessert if you know what you're doing. His eyes narrow. You can't prove I'm not done, I say gently. I slide the router log summary. Your phone brushes the home network earlier than your arrival story allows. Router logs are unreliable. He snaps, pouncing on the technical uncertainty like it's a life raft. Sometimes, I agree. Investigators still can't agree how precise they are minute to minute. That's why I'm not relying on one thing. I point to the pile. I'm relying on all times, the things that keep disagreeing with you. He breathes faster. The family man act is now visibly sweating. Now comes the quirky, fringe tidbit, the kind that sounds odd until it lands like a stone in a pond. We also send particulate samples from your shoes, I say. Casual as weather. Dust and pollen. The lab can sometimes distinguish between areas riverside trail mix versus office lot grit. It's not magic. It's just nature keeping receipts. He stares at me, and for the first time, I see a flicker of fear that isn't performative. Joke 3 slips out because I'm human and I can't resist puncturing the tension with a pin. Turns out the outdoors is judgmental. Who knew? Daniel's hands clench, then relax. He's fighting the urge to control the room by force of will. I don't push for a confession in the Hollywood sense. Confessions are fragile and messy and often fall apart. What I want is the truth of movement, where he was, what he did, and why the night's choreography doesn't match his script. So, I say softly, here's the version the evidence believes. You leave work, you make a stop, you take a detour, you come home earlier than you admit, or at least your actions touch that timeline, and you manage the scene. You silence the phone. You clean what you think matters. You try to stage a tragedy that looks like anything but murder. He's shaking his head, but the motion is small, almost mechanical. I loved her. I believe you loved the version of her that made your life look perfect, I say. I'm not sure you loved the parts of her that wanted to breathe. His eyes flash anger, shame, something tangled. Then he says it quietly, like he's surprised the words escaped. She was going to ruin everything. And there it is, the sentence that isn't a confession, but is absolutely a reveal. Motive. Naked and human and ugly. He tries to recover. I didn't mean. I keep my tone gentle. Daniel, people still debate whether cases like this are about money or ego or fear, but they almost always share one thing. The killer thinks they're preventing a loss they can't tolerate. He stares at the table, breathing hard. The mask is off now, not because he threw it away, but because he's too tired to hold it up. We don't get a neat, cinematic admission. What we get is something more real, a collapse of control, contradictions, half-explanations, a story that changes shape every time it touches a fact, and that's enough. Because by morning, we have warrants, lab confirmations, and a case file thick enough to hold the weight of what he tried to hide. Daniel Harper doesn't walk out as the grieving husband anymore. He walks out as the prime suspect whose perfect plan had one fatal flaw. He underestimated how loudly small details can speak when you stop letting the mask do the talking. Word count: 1,094. The station quiets after the paperwork storm, the kind of hush that feels earned rather than empty. I sit for a moment with my hands around a cup of something warm, finally warm, for once listening to the soft hum of lights and distant radios, letting my breathing slow back into its normal rhythm. Outside, the streets keep being streets. Damp pavement, sleepy intersections, the occasional car passing like a thought you don't need to chase. The case has its shape now, its edges traced in timestamps and tiny transfers and the kind of ordinary choices that turn life into evidence. There will be arguments later, there always are, debates about exact timing, about whether a router log is a solid clock or just a hint, about the moment Emily realized the danger, about the precise line between panic and planning. But tonight, the important part is this: the story can't hurt anyone else. I picture that house again, the neat living room, the staged calm, the family photos that tried so hard to be proof of goodness, and then I let the image fade, like lowering the volume on a song that's been playing too long. Emily's name remains steady and real, separate from the mask that tried to swallow it. The evidence is boxed and labeled now. The questions are filed. The sharp edges of the night are tucked away where they belong. And you, wherever you are listening, are safe in this moment. The doors are closed, the lights are low, and the world outside can wait until morning. Let your thoughts unclench. Let your shoulders drop. Let the last lingering footsteps of the investigation soften into silence. The cold streets, the interview room, the restless timeline, everything can rest now. All the clues can sleep. All the shadows can return to being just shadows. Breathe in slowly. Breathe out even slower.